3 words from a homeless man ended my 40-year battle with depression. Sounds impossible to believe, right? How could someone society considers a failure heal a meditation master who'd spent half his life trying to heal himself? How could 3 simple words accomplish what hundreds of books, dozens of therapies, and thousands of hours of meditation couldn't? I'd been fighting depression since age 18. 40 years living in darkness, trying to find light through every method possible. I became a monk, thinking spiritual practice would free me from mental suffering. I could meditate for 6 hours straight, teach thousands about peace, yet still cried alone every night. Those 3 words, pain passes too. But the story of how I heard them from someone I never expected would become my teacher. That's what will change your life. Depression first hit at 18 like a tsunami. No clear reason, just one day I woke up and the world had lost its color. At first, I thought it was just a phase. Then months passed, then years. I tried everything. Psychotherapy, antidepressants, yoga, exercise. At 20, I found Buddhism. Finally, I thought, here was the answer. Meditation, compassion, understanding suffering. Surely this would be the path out of mental hell. I practiced intensely, 5 hours of meditation daily. Complete vegetarian diet, following every precept. And there were beautiful moments. Mornings I'd wake feeling hopeful. Days when depression seemed to retreat. I thought I was cured, even began teaching others, but it always returned, like a monster living in my mind, waiting for my happiest moments to remind me happiness was illusion. 10 years passed, 20 years passed, 30 years passed. I became a respected monk. People came seeking advice about happiness and peace. They didn't know every night I lay down praying to die in my sleep. 40 years, 58 years old, and I was exhausted. Exhausted from pretending, exhausted from hoping, then disappointing. Exhausted from feeling like a fraud teaching happiness I'd never found. December 23rd, 3 a.m. I drove to the city's highest bridge. No suicide note, just bone-deep exhaustion. I parked and walked onto the bridge. Cold wind cut through my robes. Below was the river, black as ink. I climbed over the railing, stood on the edge, looking down at water. Just one step and 40 years of suffering would end. That's when I heard footsteps. I turned and saw a man approaching. Torn clothes, matted hair, reeking of alcohol and stale sweat. A homeless man. "Excuse me," I said, hoping he'd move on. "I need some privacy." But he didn't move. Instead, he looked at me, really looked at me, with the clearest eyes I'd ever seen. "You planning to jump?" he asked, voice hoarse but gentle. I was going to deny it, but something made lying impossible. "Yes," I whispered.
He nodded, as if this was perfectly understandable. I used to be like that too, many times. We stood in silence for several minutes. Then he sat down on the bridge sidewalk and said, "Tell me about that pain." for some reason, I did. I told this homeless stranger about 40 years of depression, about feeling like living in a black hole with no escape, about pretending to be happy until nearly shattering. He listened without judgment. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said 3 words that changed my life. Pain passes too. He continued, I've lived on streets for 15 years. 15 years wanting to die every day. But I learned everything passes. Your pain will pass too. In that moment, my entire relationship with pain transformed. I didn't jump that night. Instead, I brought teacher Marcus, his name, to the temple. Over the next 6 months, he taught me the deepest lessons about acceptance. Depression didn't disappear overnight. It still came. Those dark waves still crashed over me. But now I had words to understand. Pain passes too. I learned not to fight the waves, but surf them, knowing they'd carry me to shore. Marcus taught me depression wasn't personal failure. It didn't mean I was weak or lacking faith. It was simply part of human experience. Difficult part, but one that could bring profound understanding. I began sharing this story. The response was incredible. Thousands wrote about their struggles with depression, anxiety, mental pain. They felt seen, understood, accepted. We created Wave Rider support groups, learning to live skillfully with depression. Marcus became an integral part of our community. 2 years later, he died peacefully in his sleep at the temple. His last words, "Thank you for showing me suffering can become compassion." Today, 8 years after that night on the bridge, I still live with depression, but as teacher, not enemy. The 3 words, "Pain passes too," became mantra for thousands. Subscribe if you're struggling and need to remember pain passes too. Comment passes if you believe nothing is permanent, including suffering.